the biggest thing that I would say as a warning to anybody is there is a very real and obvious existential threat that's there. And it is simply that those who choose not to leverage AI the way I'm talking are going to get completely dominated, destroyed, and left in the dust such that they're completely irrelevant.
Welcome to ChiroX. Are you a high-earning clinic owner looking to hit the next level, to truly dominate the market and to scale beyond what you thought is possible? Then you know the landscape is shifting rapidly. What worked last year might not work today, especially with the game-changing power of AI. Today, we're with Dr. Chad Woolner, who's been on the forefront of leveraging these technologies. He's here to reveal the exact 4-step blueprint that you need to harness AI in your practice. From developing a brand identity to creating content and also to patient acquisition. We also dive deep into how to move beyond selling commodities and to create a high ticket offer to create unbelievable growth in your practice. If you're ready to future-proof your business and use AI to create a 7-figure practice and beyond, stay tuned. I want to dive into AI with you because you mentioned this is something that you know a lot about. It's something that you've helped to start a practice. This is something that if we are talking to other chiropractic business owners looking to hit that 7-figure mark, like what are the biggest opportunities in AI for people right now in terms of the chiropractic space?
Yeah, let's talk general and then we can get more specific. I would say understanding, like everything else, how you approach it makes all the difference in the world. And I will say for the vast majority, in my humble opinion, they're approaching it entirely the wrong way. They're viewing it entirely the wrong way. And in general, there are 2 general ways that you can view AI right now as it stands. Way number 1, which is the way most people are viewing it, is through the lens of abdication, meaning I call it a license to be lazy, where you just, type in a few keystrokes and then let AI do everything for you. And to a large degree, you can't blame practitioners and individuals for thinking this way because this is largely the way they're being marketed to through various predatory groups and marketers that are trying to sell it this way, that it's just going to do everything for you and you just kick back and do nothing. The other way is an augmentation tool or a leverage tool. And I use the analogy of think of it as like the Tony Stark Iron Man suit, right? The Iron Man suit is amazing, but what makes Iron Man isn't the suit by itself, but rather that augmentation of the brilliance of Tony Stark and his genius, innovation, and creativity and his human side. Similarly, the biggest opportunity I see with AI is leveraging it to increase the amount of work. People always use the saying, work smarter, not harder. I would argue that this gives us a massive opportunity to work harder and smarter to gain a lot of ground in your respective market. People talk a lot about various hypotheticals of existential threats of AI. It's going to do this, it's going to do that, doomsday, all the way to Terminator scenarios. And the biggest thing that I would say as a warning to anybody is there is a very real and obvious existential threat that's there. And it is simply that those who choose not to leverage AI the way I'm talking are going to get completely dominated, destroyed, and left in the dust such that they're completely irrelevant. I mean, it's unreal to me to see what we're able to create and do that used to take weeks, months, if not years to create can be done very, very quickly. The body of output of creation now with AI is just incredible. So that's just in general. And again, we can dive more specifically. I'm happy to I don't want this to be just this thin veneer of talking about it, but I think it's important that we first set the stage of how to think about this tool, what's upon us, because again, I think a lot are just thinking, that they're maximizing AI by just typing in a few keystrokes and getting these very vanilla, bland, outputs. And for those who have played with AI in that way, I think sometimes they're maybe a little less than thrilled with what they see. And therefore they're just like, yeah, I've tried that. I've done that. It's really not that great. And again, it's probably because you haven't effectively or creatively leveraged it the right way.
Yeah, I appreciate you setting the stage for that because this is something that I would like to get more tactical. But before we do, I think you nailed it in the sense of if you are using it and people can recognize that you're using it, you're not using it correctly.
Right.
For example, most people will throw a single prompt and they'll copy paste that into a social media post, into an email response, into a new website, copywriting, whatever their thing is how most people are using it. And dead giveaways, if you see those long dashes, if you see a bunch of emojis, if it sounds like a robot, I know you put that in AI, and that actually diminishes my trust with anything you do now moving forward.
Yeah.
However, I will say the biggest use case that I use it by far on a day-to-day basis, I probably use AI at least 2-3 hours a day. And I would say the number one use case that I use it for is essentially a consultant, a marketing consultant, a business consultant, a social media consultant, a design consultant, like whatever it is like I'm just regularly having conversations. And when I get stuck and I run into a problem and I don't know what to do, I ask the expert, AKA my AI, what I should do.
Yeah.
That's 99% of how I use it.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And I don't know if docs recognize the capabilities of how far we've come. Just a couple things for docs to understand, like, the analogy we use is the 2004 tsunami. When it happened in Thailand, the first kind of sign, if you will, of the tsunami was the tide pulled back so far that it was just this long, long, long beach. And at the beginning, people just saw that as like, well, this is weird. And they're like walking around on it, not realizing what was coming, And really that's what we've got coming right now with AI, is like this kind of experimental period right now where this is interesting. This is kind of cool. Wow. Did you see this? And it's like the wave is loading. And the point is, for those listening, they have the opportunity to position themselves such that they can ride the wave, or if they continue to just collect seashells and play around and think of it as just this clever little gimmick or whatever, they're going to get crushed, because those who are riding the wave are just going to outproduce them to such an infinite degree. What you said is exactly how I think of it, how I use it. Specifically, I'll get specific in terms of the predominant tool I use is ChatGPT. I can list off a number of others that I stack together with it. There's typically a couple different workflows that I'll follow. But one of the most common things that I'll do on a regular basis, like you said, is I'll upload any and all types of documentation. So for instance, I've got a seminar that I'm going to be teaching in August. It's a revision of a previous seminar that I had done a year ago. And so what I did was I took all of my entire slide deck and I uploaded it to ChatGPT, and I said, hey, I want to do basically like a 2.0 version of this based on what you're seeing here. What can we do to add it in to meet these criteria? This is the feedback. Oh, and that's the other thing too, is we got feedback from our previous seminars that we had done. The company we work with, Erconia Lasers, had gathered a ton of feedback. And for the most part, it was all really positive feedback, very helpful, very useful, very practical information. But then there was some constructive stuff, of course, like, hey, I would have liked them to teach more about this. Upload that to ChatGPT. Hey, based on this feedback, how can we reflect the new changes in this next version of or iteration of the seminar to make sure we're really meeting the demands and keeping our finger on the pulse of what practitioners want to learn and see and hear. In general, what we can do is you can upload audio files, you can upload video files, you can upload transcripts, you can upload PDFs, you can upload keynotes and PowerPoints, you can upload any sort of written document, you can upload research studies, right? So that's one of the common things that I'll do too, is I'll look at, like, I don't have the time, number one, to become a clinical researcher. I don't have the desire to become a clinical researcher. No offense, I just don't. And so now you can take legit clinical studies, upload them, and basically have ChatGPT synthesize those into meaningful action steps for a day-to-day clinical practitioner. Hey, what does this study mean? What do I need to know for my patients? What can I convey to my patients? How can I turn this into something meaningful that I can share with them either on a podcast or in an email sequence or on a social media post? What are some things I need to be aware of from what it's teaching or saying? What's the synthesis? Can you give me a few key quotes from this study that would be impactful for my patients, statistics from this study? And so those are just a handful of ways in which I'm leveraging it. And we can talk about I'll give a framework that I think will be very helpful for listeners here in terms of how, because that sounds cool and all, but that still might be a little bit abstract. And so I'll share with them exactly, like, this is the framework, it's what I have done over the past few years to leverage AI. So that being said, anything you want to ask about that, or where do we want to go from here?
Yeah, I do want to continue to jam on this for a moment, because I do have a few tactical things that I want to share with people, but I'll save those until you finish this up.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
The framework that I would say is it's kind of a four-part framework, four-step framework for practitioners to leverage AI. I taught a whole seminar about this 2 weekends ago in Washington, D.C. at Jay Greenstein's event. Sometimes I think we do things, and I wish I did a better job of documenting things more accurately, like, dear diary, today I did this, but I don't do that as well as I ought to. And so I just look back to the best of my ability to recall and look at, and this is based on what I see I've done and created in this whole process, how I've kind of instinctively approached it. I can see clear patterns that I can now share with docs as frameworks. And so it's kind of a four-step or four-part framework that I would give docs. Step one is brand identity, using ChatGPT and or AI to help you establish brand identity. And for those who might think that this is kind of a fluffy topic and a, kind of like this woo-woo kumbaya thing, if you look at all of the best entrepreneurial books, Good to Great by Jim Collins, Start With Why by Simon Sinek, some of the largest kind of Fortune 500 companies out there, they all start with that foundational pillar of understanding their identity. This is the reason why this is critical important is, number one, it helps you create kind of a lightning rod of attraction for your team and for your community and your patients, something that they can rally behind. This is especially critical and essential as AI continues to move forward, is because that is what is going to create human connection, is people being involved in a group and a cause and a purpose and a mission. If you saw recently, Tom Bilyeu, who is the creator of those protein bars, Quest, sold
Quest
it for like $1
Nutrition.
billion or whatever. He said his prediction, and I put a lot of stock in what he thinks because he's a pretty brilliant dude. He believes that the future of where things are going for those who are going to succeed are those that invest in human connection and groups, right? Affiliating with, leading a group of people, because that's the one thing AI isn't doing is human to human connection. And people are craving that more than ever now, is human to human connection. So brand identity, mission, vision, and purpose, right? So again, don't get too hung up on what's the exact prompt. Consult with it, ask, say, hey, here's my clinic. Here's what we currently do. We don't really have a great brand identity now, or we do, but can you help us maybe refine it a little bit so we have a very clear mission, vision, and purpose statement, as well as core values? This is exactly what I did. It spit out brilliantly, like, this is what I think, this is what I believe, this is what we want, this is what I'm hoping. I want something that's going to be very compelling to my team. And so now this becomes the lens through which we see everything, right? Hiring and firing is based off of this. The decisions we make in terms of new service lines, in terms of pricing, in terms of literally everything gets filtered through that lens of, does it jive with our core values? Does it jive with our mission, vision, and purpose? If it doesn't, easy, it gets axed, right? So that's critical, that foundation. So brand identity is number one. Number two, what I call the aggregation process. This is data aggregation. So it's a research tool. You can use this to create what they call in the MBA world a SWOT analysis, where you're analyzing and assessing strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so you can say, hey, currently in my market, in this zip code, in this community, who are some of the key players that have strengths? What are some of their weaknesses and gaps? What are some of the opportunities, whether those are strategic? What are some threats that maybe things I need to be aware of, and or threats to them potentially, in terms of, again, just creating more value in the marketplace? And then from that data aggregation, again, looking at the state of research for a particular niche. Let's say I want to create a neuropathy program. I want to create a functional medicine program. I want to create a brain health program. Look at the research and say, are there any gaps right now in the current state of research as it pertains to helping patients solve XYZ problem? If so, what are those gaps? What does the current research say? Are there new trends? Where is the puck heading? And what are some new tools that maybe people aren't aware of, or new innovations, things that I can invest in to be able to help better solve these problems? And so you start aggregating all that data, and then that takes you to the next step, what I call the curation process. I believe strongly, I've been saying this for the past 5-10 years, the chiropractor and or any other healthcare professional, because we work with a ton of healthcare professionals, your number one should be that of a solutions curator. If you view your identity through that lens, you create far more value in your marketplace, stay far more relevant long-term despite what happens with AI. If you become known in your community as somebody who solves big problems consistently and predictably for people, you will never have to worry about marketing. You'll never have to worry about any of the other stuff that comes along, because you'll be known as a solutions curator. You curate solutions for big problems. And so when I say the solution curation process, I mean, take all the data now, ChatGPT, help me synthesize this data in a meaningful way that I can create a powerful solution via the kind of way that, if you've read Alex Hormozy's book, $100 million Offers, fantastic model for how to curate solutions. When we say what's a high value solution, it's his value equation, right? What's the ideal outcome? Getting crystal clear, helping ChatGPT help you get crystal clear on what your avatar's ideal outcome looks like. And then what's the perceived likelihood to achieving that outcome, right?
Yep, definitely.
How do we create as much value as possible on the top by ideal outcome and perceived likelihood of achievement, and then divide it by how can we take away the time factor, make it as quick as possible to deliver the result and as effortless as possible. They don't expend a tremendous amount of effort, energy to achieving or getting that result, right? And so again, what that looks like in the real world with ChatGPT is it's going to take all that data and it's going to say, okay, you should incorporate chiropractic adjustments. You should incorporate this new tool or technology or technique. You should incorporate diet, nutrition, and lifestyle coaching. You should incorporate these things together, and you can refine it and kind of prune it. I like this idea. I'm not sure how this fits, right? And so you curate this process of bringing together a multitude of different modalities, tools, resources, processes, systems, whatever you want to call it, to solve big problems for patients. You become a solutions curator. That's the curation process. Last but not least, the creation process, which is everything that needs to be created. That's your pricing, your packaging, and then last but not least, your platform, right? What are you going to do to voice this and get this out into your community? I talk about chiropractors and practitioners should have their own podcasts locally in their community so that they have a platform that they can leverage and use to communicate and convey value. That becomes the hub by which all other forms of short form content spring from, is your long form content. And again, we could talk about that for 5 hours in and of itself. But just to recap, that would be the thing I would say is brand identity, aggregation, curation, and creation.
Well, I came to you wanting a masterclass on AI, and I feel like I just sat down with Yoda and got the extra masterclass on AI. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So like for the listener, he said a lot there, and that probably feels like a lot of information. But at the same time, honestly, most of what he is suggesting and recommending takes mere minutes to sit down with the platform and to execute on these things. One perfect example of this, which I actually literally did not that long ago with my own agency, is I recently had some sales calls with some clients. They didn't go through that well. And I was like, I wonder if it's my offer. So I literally went to ChatGPT and I put in like, hey, take the perspective of Alex Hormozy's taking the value equation that you just talked about. Yeah. Adjusted my offer. They put in some like certain guarantees and some other things that are suggested from the book that he wrote. In seconds, I had offers that I was already looking at and I was like, oh my God, these are so good. I don't know why somebody wouldn't buy this type situation, which is equally true for any chiropractor as well. Is like you can do the same thing if you take the steps of what you just mentioned of like going in there, getting the basis of the business of like, what is our brand identity? What is our unique selling proposition? All those different things. And then being able to create an offer, or as you call it, a solutions, which I think we're talking about the same thing.
Yep.
Okay. So like creating some sort of offer that people are like, yes, this is a huge problem that I need solved in my life. There's no reason why I shouldn't sign up and work with this chiropractor.
And I want to add one more little kind of nuance to this that I think will be massively valuable for them. And if they understand this and if they agree with this, it'll make a huge difference for them in their ability to create irresistible offers. The offer creation process is a creative process. And in that, when you understand that when you go about the initial iterations of this thing, understand one key truth, and that is constraints kill creativity. And when I say constraints kill creativity, what I mean by that is oftentimes innovation or potential innovation gets stifled by unnecessary constraints that otherwise didn't necessarily need to be there had they started first from a place of limitless possibilities. Meaning, when you go to quote unquote whiteboard, every time that I've created a winning solution, whatever that looks like, I've always started from this place of what if we could, let's remove any sort of skepticism or constraints, or let's just assume for a moment for the next hour, 2 hours, however long, let's just assume there are no constraints. There's no time constraints, resource constraints, money constraints, emotional constraints, motivational constraints, whatever the constraints might potentially be. Let's just whiteboard out on the board. And again, this is where you can chat GPT it. Hey, chat GPT, let's pretend for a moment that there are no constraints. imagine if we could create the ultimate solution for XYZ problem without any constraints. I just want to kind of like brainstorm with you back and forth. What might we come up with as some potentially revolutionary or innovative ways of helping to solve XYZ problem? And so remove constraints first, because that'll allow creativity to flow. Once you've clearly gotten an exhaustive kind of list of potentials, then you can start entering in and creating the constraints through a pruning and refining process. But what you'll find is sometimes, not all the time, but I would say often enough, you can find things that through a different angle you otherwise wouldn't have considered, because you would have thought prematurely a constraint would have precluded that potential innovative idea, right? Oh, that would never work because how do you know? And this is one of the reasons why sometimes outsiders really create some pretty innovative solutions for various industries, because of the various sacred cows that they have. Well, that'll never work because this is the way we do it. And so sometimes practitioners get that same kind of, they put these arbitrary blinders on of constraints. And so I would just simply say that advice of remove constraints first when you're going through the creative process of curating a solution.
Well said, my friend. Well said. It's the convergent versus divergent thinking, right?
Yeah.
Convergent thinking is more like just pattern recognition and doing the same thing over and over, versus divergent thinking is like, how can you think of ideas that you've never thought of that could maybe be impossible, but at least thinking of them gets the juices flowing.
It's marketing strategy, right? Love that.
Yeah. I want a hot air balloon that is the speed of sound.
Yes.
Okay, impossible, but
Yes,
anyways.
exactly.
Okay, so let's get into, I think it might make sense then to get into high ticket services then, because I know this is, unless there was anything you wanted to add to the AI thing, we could probably jam on that for 12 hours.
Yeah.
But so high ticket services, I know this is a big part and probably crucial for the growth of most practices, I would have to say. And so like, what are the common pitfalls or mistakes that you see chiropractors making when they try to implement these high ticket services, and how do they avoid them?
Great question. I would say a couple mistakes. First mistake right out the gates is doctors don't recognize the necessity of a high ticket service. And so they get stuck in their kind of typical way of doing things, where they don't, first of all, understand the necessity of knowing your metrics and your numbers, knowing what a customer is worth or a patient is worth, your lifetime value, your LTV, whatever you want to call it, your case average, pick a name, right? You know, Dan Kennedy famously once said, "He who can spend the most to acquire a customer wins every time." And you don't know how much you can spend to acquire a customer if you don't know what a customer is worth to you in the first place, right? And so I would say biggest error number one is docs not knowing their metrics sufficient to know what is your average case value, what is a case worth to you in general. And we're constantly trying to increase that. On the small end or small scale, if you follow Russell Brunson, right, from a funnel standpoint, he's always talking about, you know, your average cart value, right? And the whole name of the game in that world, if you're talking low ticket funnels, is you're trying to get your cost per conversion to equal or be lower than, or I should say your average cart value to be equal or higher than your conversion rate, right? So that if you can break even, then you've acquired a new customer, a new member of your audience, a new member of your tribe, whatever you want to call that you can now market to and upsell long-term. Similarly, but on the opposite end of that kind of spectrum, right, is we're looking at high ticket, right? And so the idea with high ticket being is that the higher the value, the more flexibility, the more meat on the bone you have, so to speak, to be able to offset the costs to acquire those people in the first place, right? So you as an agency owner, you probably know metrics better in general across the board than I do in terms of knowing what you're seeing in terms of the cost to drive a lead, number one, through the door, and then number two, on average, that's going to vary depending on a number of factors with the clinic, but what that's going to take to actually get them to convert, what's the cost, right? And so you could throw out to a doc, you know, hey, I can get you a new patient for $1,000. And that to some docs just might be sticker shock, because they're like, holy crap, you know, that's typically my case average is like 1,500 when I calculate it, if they know it, right? Well, again, that math probably not going to make a whole lot of sense. But for a doc who's got, like, let's say a really high ticket premier brain health solution for 10K all day long. Yeah, I'll take $1,000 to get somebody to sign up for a $10,000 care plan all day. That makes a ton of sense. So I would say first and foremost, knowing the numbers. Secondly, I would say the other big mistake that I see is, again, they think of this way too much through the commodity lens rather than the solution lens. And what I mean by the commodity lens or the modality lens, right? And this is partly due to the fact, and this is no offense to anybody, but we see this because doctors get pitched by and marketed to all these various technology and equipment companies, right? Shockwave is a big one right now that has been for a couple of years, right? And it's great. It's an amazing tool, incredible tool. But I think he would be the first to agree with me when I say you're better off weaving Shockwave into a complete solution than you are trying to sell it as a one-off. And that's, I think, what happens is a lot of docs view high ticket as I'm going to sell this modality. I do a lot with lasers, right? I'm going to sell lasers. That's my high ticket offer is lasers. And I would suggest and propose a paradigm shift that that's not a high ticket offer. That's a modality or thereby it is a commodity, right? And the reason being is because any other practitioner, the minute that they get that same piece of equipment, you're now in the commodities game. And now it becomes the whole race to the bottom. Well, he's charging $80 a session for his Shockwave or $100 a session. Well, I'm going to undercut him and do $80. The point is, if you're selling the tool itself and that you're thinking is your high ticket offer, again, the paradigm shift is weave that into a more complete and comprehensive solution. And if you're not certain of what I mean by that, again, talk to ChatGPT and say, hey, how could I, for Shockwave, right? It could really, let's say we're going to target knee pain with Shockwave. What else could we weave together or curate to better solve knee pain? Well, we could create a supplement stack that would help with inflammation, mobility, movement, right? We could incorporate a home rehab program. We could incorporate knee decompression. We could incorporate some type of injection therapy. And if a clinic's like, we're not integrated, there's actually a really creative, easy solution that you can solve for that constraint right there, right? Again, this is what I mean by constraints kill creativity, right? So you would say, we can't do injections because we're not a medically integrated clinic. And then again, if you thought that way, great. But what you just did there potentially is you just left a massive piece of the solution on the table or a massive chunk of revenue on the table. And so there's a really simple way to solve for that constraint. Reach out to strategic partners. If you did your aggregation process correctly by looking at the data of the SWOT analysis, oh, it just so happens that this group of orthopedic docs or this nurse practitioner down the road, cool. Well, I'm going to be doing a knee program, but I don't do the injection portion of it. If I were to send patients your way and you were just to fulfill that for me, how much would you charge me to do that? Negotiate a rate, you weave that in, you put a small little upsell portion, a fee for your solution integration of that. And then that just becomes part of your solution. You don't have to integrate. You can just weave that in as part of your total solution, right? So in terms of high ticket, to answer your original question, stop thinking so one-dimensionally in terms of this thing is the solution, and rather step back, zoom out, and say, how does this make sense? How do we weave together? And the beautiful part about this is the idea of making more money per patient or per case, and the idea of solving problems for people should not be mutually exclusive. The former should be a direct reflection of the latter, meaning the greater the value you're providing for them, the greater the degree you're solving the problem for them, should be reflected in the price, right? That they're paying more money because what you're doing is you're solving the problem far better for them to a far greater degree, to a far more complete degree. And so that would be my advice in terms of high ticket is shift your paradigm away from the single modality, less binary. Well, we don't just do that. We also give them a nutrition plan or whatever, and that's cool. But again, think more holistically and completely. What else? Always ask that question of what else, right? If you could create the ultimate solution, what else could you do to make it such that patient just, number one, couldn't say no, number two, would get the very best possible outcome in that whole solution.
I'm going to speak for the listener in something that I think they might be asking themselves as you're describing this high ticket offer, just so we're clear.
Yeah.
Is this something that you are creating a completely new offer that's high ticket that people then can choose to opt into? Or is this more or less just like packaging it all into a bigger offer that you're providing to your patients?
Yeah, a great question. I would say either or. I would say the power of creating it and turning it into its own entity as a program allows you the ability to market that thing exclusively, right? So in our clinic, in our town here, Align Integrated Medical, and I learned this from a audio program. So shout out to the guys whoever created it years ago, audio CD program called Monopolize Your Marketplace. They said most brick and mortar businesses, whether you're a chiropractor, a plumber, a dentist, a whoever, rely on platitudes to position themselves, right? When I say platitudes, like we provide quality care, we care about you, we treat you like family, all this stuff that's like just subjective. There's no objectivity to it, right? What you need is you need hard data and objective facts to differentiate, right? So what I mean by that is Align Integrated Medical, we have over 400 five-star Google reviews. That's fact. That's an objective differentiator, right? We've been in business for over 15 years experience, over 30 years combined clinical experience, right? Objective fact. We are the only clinic in the Treasure Valley to offer the disc restore program. We are the only clinic to offer the metabolic reset program. We are the only clinic to offer the brain restore program, right? So these are objective differentiators when you say we're the only ones to offer this branded solution. And I would argue that patients will perceive to a higher degree, a higher or greater degree of value to a branded solution than to just this collective, we do these things here at our clinic. The moment that you package them in a way that is branded, or better yet, like sub-branded, Align Integrated Medical offers these branded programs, these branded solutions. Those will inherently have or carry with them a far greater perceived value. Dan Kennedy again said, patients will pay a higher fee for the same thing packaged differently or better. And that's the thing I would just say is when you can package things and articulate it better. And so much of that packaging, it's not just smoke and mirrors and sleight of hand. Oh, it just seems like it's, a circus sideshow and, magic tricks and parlor tricks and all that. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is confidence and buy-in from the patient, right? When they see that the system is organized and it's sequential and it's done the right way and it's been methodically mapped out, and they can visually see and easily grasp the flow and the process and the cadence and the systems, it creates a higher degree of buy-in on their part. It creates a higher degree of confidence on their part. And I promise you that bleeds into, it's hard to differentiate or tease out to what degree that plays a role in the clinical outcomes that they get. If they have a higher degree of confidence going into it, there is a much, much greater likelihood of the placebo effect entering in. I love the placebo effect. I think it's great. Now, the stuff that we do has plenty of sufficient double-blind placebo-controlled research to support it. But if you're trying to not leverage placebo, I would say you're missing out. You should have patients perceiving that you're an expert, perceiving this program's the best program ever. Their confidence should be high going into it because it's going to dramatically improve the outcomes that they get. Just perception is everything. So.
Yeah, it does. And I would add to that too is like, I think that the more fully you can solve a problem, the higher price you can charge to solve that problem. For example, like if I wanted to get from North Boise to South Boise, is like, there's a lot of ways you could do that, right? Like one way you could solve that problem is you could walk. Another way you could solve that problem is you could take a bike. You could take a car. You could take an Uber. And I would say like, if you can fully solve the problem in a quick and efficient and effective manner of being able to solve the problem of needing to get from North to South Boise in an effective way, it requires a car, it requires gas, it requires the knowledge of on how to drive the car. It requires a lot of things to be able to make that happen. Yeah. That's a full solution to the problem, but it's equally true for a chiropractor in a clinic. Is like if somebody comes to you for, we'll say, lower back pain, you could provide an adjustment, which may provide them some immediate relief. But it's like if you can solve all the problems around what might be causing that lower back pain, that's a far more valuable offer than it is just a single service. It's like, how can you fully solve this problem and then provide all the solutions that are required to solve this problem and then use that as your high ticket offer, if I'm understanding you correctly?
Yes. And one piece of that equation that I would give docs that will massively help them is understand the true nature of the problem that you're solving for and or what they want solved for. Meaning, if you don't get clarity on that, you're going to miss out on a huge opportunity. And what I mean by that is, I don't want to say 9 out of 10, but a substantial number of people who come through your door will stick with low back pain. We'll just say that, right? Many practitioners assume way too much in terms of what they think they're solving for and or what they think the patient wants. They're going to assume that the patient wants to get rid of their back pain. Okay, well now let's talk about from a chart here. We're comparing chiropractic care versus Advil versus massage versus acupuncture versus surgery versus doing nothing and waiting it out. Chiropractic is a really hard sell if that's all you're going up against. If the solution is, I just want pain relief, most people are going to opt for doing nothing. Hence why so many chiropractors have a hard time converting people. They look at your care plan. If you're having a tough time getting patients to convert to care, it's because the problem you're solving for isn't sufficiently deep enough. It isn't sufficiently a valuable enough problem, because perception, again, is everything. And so most patients, whether it's accurate or not, they perceive, I've had this before, and if I just wait it out, it'll go away eventually. I can't afford care right now, and so therefore I'm just going to wait this thing out. And so doing nothing will always be easier than doing something. Or, I'll just take some Advil, or I'll grab some supplements, or I'll just get a quick massage, or whatever the choice is that's going to be a cheaper, more convenient thing for that solution. So the way you solve for that, and this is where I think a lot of chiropractors, dare I say most, get it wrong, is they don't take the time and or go through the right process and steps to understand the true nature and degree of the problem and understand what the patient really wants solved. Meaning, when we preach this and teach this to our docs ad nauseum over and over, is you get clarity on what their goals are. And so we ask the same phrase every time with every new patient. So if you were my new patient, Corey, I would say, Corey, I understand you're struggling with low back pain. It's been going on for the past 5 years. You've tried physical therapy. You've tried medications. You even got some cortisone injections, and things have progressively just kind of stayed about the same, maybe a little bit worse. How did I do? Did I get that right? Really help so that we make sure we're on the same page in terms of understanding, first and foremost, the nature of what's going on. But before we get into that, I want to know what your goals are. And so what I mean by that is, obviously, I know you want to get out of pain. That's why you're here today. You've expressed that to me, but I want to go a little bit deeper than that. If we could wave the proverbial magic wand, fast forward 6 months or a year from now, what would a successful outcome look like for you on a daily basis? Like, what would that look like to you? What are things that you want to resume doing that this has interfered with? What are things that you've been prevented from doing? What are, job related stuff, daily activities, family relationships, whatever we need to elicit, create real value in terms of like, okay, this is not just a temporary band-aid thing. This goes beyond pain. This is now functional. This is now meaningful. This is impactful. This is my job on the line. This is relationships with my kids and my spouse or significant other on the line. This is golf. This is skateboarding. This is my scholarship. This is whatever that thing is that actually starts to a far greater degree. And now all of a sudden what you start equating them to, or all of a sudden the magnitude or the degree of the problem and thereby the solution is more congruent, if that makes sense. Because now they're not just looking at a commodity, they're looking at an actual, okay, how do you help me solve for this legitimate problem here versus this nuisance, versus this annoyance, this inconvenience? So I think that's an important distinction that they need to understand.
Yeah, I think we're tapping into sales at this point, right?
Yes.
Is like really understanding what somebody truly wants and what the destination is that they're actually hoping to get to.
Yep.
It's the classic, like, sell the destination, not the plane flight.
Yep.
And it's like, I don't care. I just want to go to Bali. It's like, tell me about how we're going to get to Bali.
Seinfeld skit, right?
Maybe.
He's talking about how the pilot gets on and he's like, we're going to take it up to 30,000 feet. And then we're going to cruise at an altitude of 700 miles an hour. Just get me to where it says on the ticket. That's fine. It's Jerry Seinfeld, but his whole skit, that's exactly what he says. Is he's like, passengers on the plane, they don't care about the details of the trip. They just want to get to their destination. That's really what they're after. That's why they're there in the first place, especially with today's day and age with flights.
In chiropractic is the same thing,
Yeah.
right? Is like, I think that's the mistake that I see happen a lot, is they're talking about the plan and the adjustments and how many they're going to do and what the process looks like. Really what they want is, if I was the patient and you were saying that to me, the first thing that came to my mind, if I had lower back pain, is like, I want to get back to lifting weights again and working out and going to the gym. And like, that's what I want, but
exactly.
I don't care how you're going to get me there, honestly.
Yeah.
But to make the most of our time here, I think the next thing I want to talk into is, since we're kind of on this tactical route, I want to tap into a little bit about some of the marketing strategies. I know you know a lot about this, and I'm sure you've tried lots of things, from probably ads and workshops and everything in between. I was talking to somebody recently who does a lot of, what does he do? He does dinners with the doctor. And he says like 90% of his job is doing dinners with the doctors. But I'm curious, from your experience and having a practice for a long time, is like, maybe what are the things that people think works and what are the things that actually works, and how do you make something that's scalable, I guess you could say?
Yeah. So I'm kind of a marketing geek nerd slash snob, marketing purist, if you will. And what's interesting is I tend to find when I look back at the past 10, 15 years that I've really been heavily involved in learning marketing, coaching and teaching marketing to practitioners, I've kind of vacillated a little bit from one polar end to another. I'm hoping that maybe I'm landing on some sort of a happy medium. I would look at marketing through a lens of what I considered a purist form of marketing, and that was direct response marketing, right? Russell Brunson, Dan Kennedy, Gary Halbert, all of the kind of OGs, Gary Bencivenga, like direct response copywriting, Claude Hopkins, scientific advertising, looking at numbers and data, which I'm not saying that that's not important anymore. It is. But I would almost view through a lens of disdain brand advertising, branding. And I would always kind of like scoff at that and make fun of that and be like, yeah, if you want to waste your money, go with branding. You can do that. What's interesting is it seems like what used to be these two polar ends of a spectrum, with the way things are shaping up with the world today, and especially with AI, these two worlds are starting to kind of like blend and converge together. It's really fascinating. And I think it's a direct reflection of the advent of AI, but I think it was even preceded by the fact that what social media and all these different channels have done is they have massively fragmented attention. And so with the fragmentation of attention, it's become very difficult to deal in the attention game appropriately, right? And so you're forced to, as a practitioner, have to play into that game to some degree of branding and brand awareness and or personal branding, if that's what you want to call it, right? And so from kind of a high level view, I think that what the future holds, and I'll tell you, like, I don't have an answer quite yet, but I can almost guarantee you what's coming down the pipeline is right now, if you look at the way things are shaping up and just look at your own personal behavior, look at the way search is evolving right now. It used to be Google was 99.99999% the solution for search. Now it's like 50-50, if not more, 60-40, 70-30, ChatGPT and Google. It just depends on how I'm searching and what I'm searching for. Sometimes it'll be just if it's a quick one-word Google still, but if I need to search something a little bit more nuanced, it's going to be ChatGPT every time, right? And so number one, you have to start asking critical questions of how do you set yourself up for success with this evolution that is currently taking place with the search game. Meaning, how do you position yourself to be relevant in terms of search with AI and ChatGPT? Number two, keep your eyes open, because I guarantee you it's going to come where ChatGPT is going to offer some sort of a pay-to-play model, just like Google has, just like Facebook did. You remember when Facebook arrived on the scene back in, what was it, 08, maybe 09, for like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years, it didn't take in any ad revenue. Google or Facebook ads were not a thing. And I remember, at first it was this utopian kind of like kumbaya, we're just here to connect and have fun and all that stuff. And then the minute ads came out, it was just like, holy cow. And I think that's similar to this. I mean, it's just ironic, right? Because ChatGPT started, the company that owns ChatGPT is OpenAI, open source, right? When in reality, it's kind of an oxymoron in the sense that it's a privately held company. It's a clearly for-profit company. And I think they're just waiting, I don't think too long from now, to where they're going to start incorporating some degree of a paid search component to that. What that looks like, I don't know, can't say. But the answer to, regardless of where that comes into play, is I think you need to kind of have a healthy mix of both direct response and brand-based kind of marketing strategies. So that's high level, and docs are like, okay, what does that actually mean, or what does that look like? I would say right now, one of the most stable still sources of consistent new patient generation, in my opinion, is Google pay-per-click. When you get that dialed in very well, that is as close to a set and forget system as you can possibly get, in my opinion. If you're not sure how to do that, that's where you reach out to Corey and people like that.
Yeah.
And especially if you know your numbers and your metrics, right now, I would say if you can get a new patient lead for anywhere between $40 to $70 ish, you're doing pretty well. And that's typically where we're hovering. Currently, I can tell you right now, we're a little on the high end. So let me give you an update so that docs have a more clear picture of where we actually have been over the past year. This is almost a year's worth of data now. We're as of June 17th.
Also, too, for the listener, we've put together a document as well that has like a bunch of KPIs on it. And one of the metrics on there is that. And it basically ranks like good, average, bad in terms of exactly what you said, like pay-per-clicks.
Yeah,
and
our
a whole bunch of KPIs.
all-time average has been about $60 a lead is what we've been getting. We're getting on our actual funnel that's landing to about a 12% opt-in rate, which is pretty good for a local funnel. That's when you consider a lot of other local funnels are hovering between 2 and 4%, in terms of an opt-in. We're at 12%, so we're massively higher. And so to answer your question in terms of marketing, what that looks like, setting up a good proven funnel for Google PPC, I think should be some sort of a foundational pulse. Layering in niche-based condition-specific marketing through Facebook, Instagram, and or TikTok is another layer in that puzzle. But then another foundational layer that I think is essential, especially moving forward into the future, is you can call it this branding strategy. And that takes on many different forms. I would say foundationally creating some sort of a long form platform like your own podcast that can be leveraged a variety of ways, including strategic relationships in your own local community, reaching out to other healthcare professionals, having them on your podcast, opening up that door to potential referral relationships, community outreach as part of your quote unquote branding efforts, providing valuable content to your existing audience, your patient base as part of your branding, creating relevance at the end of the day to a lot of docs. So again, this is like dating me, but like I arrived on the scene when back in the day, there was this idea of what was called black hat and white hat SEO marketing for Google, right? Black hat was like all the ninja backdoor hack tactics that you were trying to cheat the system and beat the system and all that. And I remember learning all these different, this cool thing, you can beat the algorithm this way. And then the white hat was more the tried and true, like, no, we're going to do this the honest way. And it was like this very kind of utopian way of thinking. We need to make the internet this land of fluffy goodness. At the end of the day, Google has been very honest and straightforward with people in the sense of local business owners. If you want to increase your rankings, your visibility, your search results, be more relevant, right? And that sounds maybe perhaps a bit too generic to docs. Like, what does that actually mean? The answer is really simple. The relevance formula to me, what that looks like is answer the queries that are right in front of you, meaning ask ChatGPT, what are the most commonly asked questions in my community about chiropractic, about back pain, about this, about that, about that. And then you go to work. It's hard work. I'm not going to say it's not, but you go to work answering those questions to create more value, create valuable, thoughtful content, podcast episodes, if that's what you want to do, answering those questions in long format, and then splicing that up through AI, right? And this is where some of the AI tools come into play. We use submagic.co, right? You can take long form and split it up into 30 or 40 different short form videos that you can then parse out to Instagram or TikTok or YouTube Shorts. You can use Veed.io to do the same thing. You can use Descript to do a bunch of the same thing as well. There's a bunch of different platforms you can use to do that short form and long form content all together, right? But what you're doing here is you're not just throwing content out there because again, I think practitioners think that the secret to social is some algorithm, right? You got to post X number of times a day and it's got to be at this time and you're going to hear these people and you got to get these settings just right and everything like that. And it's like, I promise you, it's not as ninja as so many of these marketers and influencers would have you believe. It's just about being useful and valuable, i.e. being relevant. That's what relevance is, right? So if you can be valuable to your community by being a trusted resource that can answer these common questions and really just put out good, useful, relevant information, that's going to help, number one. Number two, in terms of how you do that, the other way in fact, I would lead with this first, is using your content as a mechanism and a system for automating your indoctrination, your education, and or your positioning with leads that come through your door. So the way I use my content, I have a podcast. I record podcast episodes based around specific solutions that I'm marketing for, let's say, disc issues, right? So if I get a lead that comes in that says, raise their hand and says, I'm interested in your guys' disc decompression offer. Cool. I'm going to send you my episode where I talk for an hour at length about our program and about how to solve disc problems the right way. And then on top of that, you're going to get my free ebook that I generated all about what I call the truth about disc herniations, what your doctor doesn't know. What I'm trying to do is be valuable and useful, thereby relevant. And what happens is when you do that, your relevance increases, i.e. your branding increases, if that's what you want to call it, right? So it's this hybrid mix between direct response and branding kind of merging together. And what that does is as your relevance increases, so does your positioning. Because again, what you're doing as you become more and more relevant, your competitors become less and less relevant. The choice becomes clear. You're no longer a commodity. Now, all of a sudden, price is not the primary. Great quote from, what's the book? Selling the Invisible by Harry Beckwith. He says, in the absence of value, cost is the only consideration. And so really what you're trying to do is just become more useful and more valuable. The more valuable and the more useful you can become, the more decommoditized you become, the more you can charge what prices you feel are truly you are worth. And then now you're not going to have these people coming in and tire kicking and plate looking and price shopping you and your solutions. They're there because you've provided sufficient relevance and value by information that they've consumed. And docs this might sound like really fluffy and theoretical to docs, but I've proven this time and time again. I've done it not only in my practice, but in other practices. And docs that follow this process, it's not overnight. It'd be amazing. It's definitely been compressed because of AI. But when you do it, what'll happen is people will show up to your clinic having consumed that content, and they're there to be serious. I've gone through your material. I've read it. I agree with everything you say. I'm in. Like, what do we need to do to get started? I mean, it's a massive difference in terms of the caliber and quality of the people that come through your door. So I know I've rambled here for a bit, but hopefully that answers the question in terms of marketing and future of marketing and what that looks like. That's the best I could share in terms of like what that would look like according to what I've seen and what I'm predicting moving forward.
Yeah, you nailed it, man. Like, again, that's even with the AI thing, this feels like another topic where we could jam for another 5 hours. But if there was a single word that I could wrap a bow around this, that's really come top of mind from everything you just explained and everything that I've experienced as well from doing it myself, is like intentionality.
Yeah.
I think is the biggest thing, is like, because like here's a simple case study example that I've seen time and time again is like I do audits for clinics pretty regularly. And one of the things that I've noticed is that there's a large majority of them that have obviously hired some agency to just create social media. And it's always the same generic templated type photos or whatever it is. And it's like, it has nothing to do, like you said, about like the numbers or some hacking some algorithm or like constantly posting or how consistent you are. Like, we're so past that season. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, we're now in the season of, it really has to be intentional. It has to be good. It has to be for a specific person. It has to solve a specific problem. That doesn't mean like that it's not valuable to have quantity, but like the quality now is like, you just need to be more intentional.
Yes.
From every step, from the landing page, from the ad to the content that you create to the FAQs that you've, like, all of it just has to be so much more intentional.
100%. And I would say too, that's going to be that much more pertinent and relevant as AI continues, because now what's happening is, I guarantee you, there are agencies and practitioners out there that are just throwing out all sorts of really crappy, thoughtless AI generated content that's just flooding these channels. And I guarantee you, moving forward, that's not going to be an end user experience that most of these platforms want to create, right? That's not the type of experience that they want. And so what will start to stick out like a sore thumb is content like this, where it would have been far easier for you, Corey, to just go ahead and, again, throw together a couple prompts and get ChatGPT and other various AI, HeyGen and Veed and all these others that are capable of doing a full interview like this, AI driven, but it's a massive difference with the human element versus AI. And eventually, maybe down the road, it's going to be indistinguishable. I think we're still a ways off from that. So all the more reason to be more heart-centered and intentional, like you said, in terms of what you're creating. And again, it's easier to just keystroke the, like I said at the very beginning, abdicate, and just kind of keystroke some AI stuff and throw it out there in mass quantities because you can. But I think a better route is to be, again, more intentional, take the time, make the effort, put out the energy. It's going to stick out in a very, very good way in a sea full of generic AI content. I think stuff that's original and like this, very, very real is going to stand out that much more so.
And I think people forget too that you can, yes, you can help your brand, but you can also damage your brand as well. And
Sure.
every decision you make, every piece of content you post, everything you do with a patient is rather helping or hurting your brand. There are no neutral engagements.
Right.
And so, like, to do the single keystroke, pump a bunch of crap out is like you're actually damaging your brand,
Yeah.
both your personal brand and your business brand.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So this has been an insanely fruitful conversation, and I can genuinely say, Chad, that I have enjoyed every second of this.
Likewise.
But where can people learn more about you? So there's Simplified Functional Medicine. What's your plug?
Thank you. We have a program, simplifiedfunctionalmedicine.com. I'm the CEO, co-founder of that, along with my amazing business partners, Dr. Andrew Wells and Dr. Jason Green. We just released our latest project, Applied Functional Neurology. This is a program for brain health that practitioners can plug in record time into their practices. And so for practitioners who are interested in helping to solve and get involved in solving today's biggest brain health epidemic, they can check out what we're doing at afneuro.com. And the premise or the idea behind what prompted us to do this is there needed to be a better solution for brain health out there today. It's just a rampant epidemic, and there isn't a good solution right now. And we wanted to create a streamlined solution because we believe that if we're going to make a dent in the brain health epidemic, the answer lies in general in rapid mobilization of more practitioners equipped with the right techniques, systems, and tools to be able to help solve these issues, and to be able to do it in a way that doesn't take them a year, 2 years, 5 years to get up and running, but rather plug a system in that can be rapidly implemented within 30 days to 6 weeks, so that practitioners can start really getting into their communities and offering a valid solution for these types of issues. And so those are the two biggest projects right now that we're focused on, is Simplified Functional Medicine and Applied Functional Neurology.